So I manage the ConcreteZero initiative. So the focus is on creating a global market for low and near or net zero carbon concrete. So that's, very not academic. This is ideally realizing change in the real economy through our members who are kind of leading corporates in this space. So yes, there's a lot of people and process. And yes, there's some book work, but what we really push for is real world change. So, and focus being carbon reduction.
So how do you create low carbon or zero carbon concrete?
So the material itself. So that's really interesting. And to be fair, I did listen to one of your earlier podcasts. So there was a representative from Ceratec who, being an innovator in this space, gave some really nice explanations of some of the green chemistry, some of the material science that goes into the development of these concretes. So yeah, I can probably give it a little bit of a summary here, but I would also recommend maybe dipping back into that episode. So the concrete is made up of cement, as well as aggregates, sand and water primarily, and some other additives. And so carbon impact, maybe 85-90% of it sits within the cement, even though if you were to look at how much cement is in concrete, it's relatively little. So it's the glue that holds everything together. It wouldn't be concrete without it, but in terms of mass, it's mostly stone and sand. But this cement is primarily made using very high energy processes, heating minerals, rocks, limestone up to really high temperatures. And so there's the fuel in the heating, but there's also a chemical reaction that happens and releases carbon dioxide. So that's the challenge with the ways that the material scientists look at reducing the carbon in concrete is to substitute in lower carbon materials instead of the cement. So when I say cement, that's ordinary Portland cement. And the substitutes, there are many. There are some that are kind of common, well used, within current standards. And those include slags from steel production, fly ash from coal-fired power stations. So maybe not your ideal green solutions, but those are the ones that are readily available. And there's a lot of energy and focus now on extending and diversifying the materials that we can use in this way. And that includes clays, as well as pozzolan, lots of clays, as well as different types of minerals and chemicals.
So in essence, what you're saying then is you take away the cement and you take a byproduct or what some may class as a waste product from something else and use that as a replacement for the cement. And so by doing that, that means the concrete is lower in terms of carbon emissions?
Yes, it's lower. And I would say there's a limit you can get to using these kind of off-the-shelf substitutions that we just talked about. There is a limit to how much of these other materials you can put in. And that's where the more advanced chemistries and interventions are being sought. So there's lots of great thinkers addressing this from the supply side, from the material chemistry side. And I think it's very interesting. We at ConcreteZero are keeping a close eye and doing what we can to kind of support that kind of activity that's being led by the innovators and the concrete suppliers and the industry organizations that represent them. ConcreteZero sits in a slightly interesting place, being that our members don't produce concrete or cement. They're the ones that use the materials. And that puts them in a very interesting position in terms of shaping, driving, influence in the market. And I think it's a sort of a very important part of the story. Ultimately, any transition in the concrete material will have to be implemented on construction sites. Mm-hmm. And the people doing that implementation are the constructors. And they're obviously been influenced by the decisions of the engineers and the choices of the clients. And that is the space that we at ConcreteZero think is a very important perspective, a very important lever in itself to bring into the conversation around tackling concrete emissions.
You mentioned before about the conversation I had with Barney from Ceratec, and he went into great detail of his approach. The thing as well that he mentioned is that the industry, as in the cement industry or the concrete industry, have got a very well-established business model that works well financially for them. And so that they were really hesitant to have a disruptor come in and disrupt their well-oiled flow of business. And it's interesting that you mentioned that your clients, or that your members, are actually users of the cement. So so first of all, there's two questions. One of them is, do you agree with Barney? Are there forces at play to try and keep the status quo? Second question would be, are you looking to drive a change within the market so that the market is demanding net zero cement, as opposed to the current model, which is the market is just supplied with cement, and the whole net zero thing, well, don't worry about that.
Yeah, right. I'll take the first question first. So I think the industry is very efficient. So the supply chain is very efficient to responding to the demand. So it isn't just on the supply side. It needs to be hand in hand with a strong, consistent, clear demand signal. So hopefully what we're trying to advance at ConcreteZero will help that. What is needed to get to net zero concrete is going to be a transition, and that does include changing the physical materials, and that will require shifting the supply chains, so changing the current model. But in terms of who's best placed in many respects to realize those changes, I think we've got to give credit to the depth of expertise in the current sector. And they are the ones that are so primed to be able to respond to the shift, hopefully, because it is urgent, I would say. There is a need to accelerate what is currently being put on the market. So we really hope that there are changes in the market that will result in measurable reductions in what our members can report on their projects, but on overall, so both for the UK, but also in other markets. So what we see in the UK is a relatively mature market. So we're not building that much faster or that much slower than we have been over the previous decades. So it's pretty consistent. But that is not the case in lots and lots of markets. So there are estimates that say, globally, a city the size of Paris is being built weekly. So there's a huge amount of concrete So if you think globally in developing countries, and obviously concrete is not the only material, but there is sort of a need to support this growth as well as realizing the global sort of net zero ambitions.
Do you
So
think?
that might have been only first question, to be fair.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned that there's a city the size of Paris being built, say, weekly. So globally, a city is being constructed the size of Paris each week.
Yeah. So, distributed a building worth of city. Yeah.
Across the globe.
Yeah.
Paris is being built across the globe, but spread out across the globe as opposed to in one country.
Yeah, and
but that's significant though across the globe.
Major countries where that development is happening includes India. China has obviously had a lot of building, and that is slowing, but they're still building very fast, as well as pretty much everywhere in the global south are aspiring or are meeting their housing and needs for growing populations, and that requires considerable construction materials. So there's concrete decarbonisation globally, but the context is very important. So what we experience in the UK is very different to in other markets. We as Climate Group, so to maybe step back, we're an international not-for-profit, so that gives us some ability to start to work in different markets on different topics. So as I said, I manage the ConcreteZero initiative, but I have colleagues who work in renewable energy and transport, steel and food. And these are other corporate initiatives that bring leaders together to shape and influence policy and the other requirements they need to realize the sort of the lower carbon future in these high intensity areas. And that means I've got colleagues in New York and Amsterdam, India and Beijing as well. So not all working on concrete, but working in these different areas. And it's definitely a very strong network to pull in to start to understand the context in these different markets.
So going into the second part of my question, which is more around trying to maintain the status quo, I think for these, was that not my second?
That was the first part. But the second part, I believe it was about the sort of the why the demand signal.
Okay.
So yes, asking, how do you ask for low carbon concrete?
Yeah.
Some of the work we did in the early days was come up with a definition. When we say low carbon concrete, do you hear the same? Do you take away the same meaning as me? And in the UK, where we first established, we were very lucky to be able to pull on some work by a group of volunteers called the Lower Carbon Concrete Group, who went through quite an amazing exercise of trying to map the embodied carbon of all the concrete on the UK market. So it's called the Low Carbon Concrete Group Market Benchmark. It's a graph, ultimately, but for different concrete strengths, it shows the distribution. So the lowest embodied carbon on the market, the highest, and then the distribution in between. That is really a very, very useful resource to be able to say, to be able to use, and to be able to say, okay, when I say lower carbon concrete, I mean this on this graph. The UK is quite unique in being able to have that resource. And I have a sort of a lot of respect for the team who developed that first market benchmark. It's now in its fifth iteration. So, that you need to evolve it, you need to maintain it every year. Hopefully you see an improvement and you need to track that. Because we're trying to replicate it in Singapore at the moment. So the learning from the UK team, bringing it to Singapore, trying to get them that visibility of what is the embodied carbon on their market, so that the concrete users can ask the suppliers, I want this embodied carbon. It looks like you can do it. Or I want to be part of the movement driving improvements. So I want you to be able to supply me a concrete with significantly lower carbon than the average. And that's, if everybody's asking for better than the average moves down, and that's what we really need to see.
Because normally, I guess, when someone's looking to make a decision on purchasing concrete, the thing that's driving them predominantly would be how much is it per square.
This is another stat which I find quite interesting. So over a whole construction project, concrete may contribute around 2%, 4%, I'd say lower single digits to the overall cost. However, in terms of the carbon impact of that construction project, it's likely to be 40% or more. So that's an order of magnitude shift. So we're finding that with the realization of the carbon impacts of the concrete, it is shifting more attention onto the choices being made around concrete on construction projects. So whereas, they might have only been looking at the price, but to be honest, when it's, they may not have been looking that hard if it was, only 2% of the price. We find that it is not unusual for, major clients to have no idea how much concrete was used on a project. So ultimately, why do they need to know? In a way, so the contractors manage the concrete, and they do a great job, and it is built. So what's the value? Maybe previously, what was the value of really knowing how much concrete was used? But when you realize the carbon impact of that concrete, it sort of makes the case of understanding the concrete a little bit better.
100%. And as you're speaking now, I'm thinking, actually, that rings true. That would just be picked up by the contractors.
Yeah.
This is the price that I'm paying for you to deliver this. Go and do it.
Yeah. So we think there's probably a case for paying more attention to concrete, the choices around it, and so with our members, we work to make this demand signal. So we've defined low carbon concrete. Another part of the membership is making a commitment to decarbonize it. So those are time-bound. So time-bound commitments to reduce the embodied carbon of your concrete by such an amount. So we've got a net zero 2050 target, but also introduced interim targets for procuring or specifying or otherwise using different, because people, interact with concrete in different capacities on the demand side. 30% below the threshold, the low carbon threshold by 2025, and then 50% by 2030. So those commitments get people to sit up as well, get people to take notice and question their choices. So we think that is a really strong mechanism for unlocking some of the, having got to know the members. I've been in the role a year now. There's a lot of really ingenious people who know concrete, backwards, forwards, every which way. They're very, very knowledgeable. They're very skilled. And it's really, enabling them to put some of their focus onto the carbon optimization. They already optimize for program and for cost and for multitudes of other performance characteristics. So it is, in a way, absolutely doable, but there are sort of probably cultural, organizational, structural hurdles that our members are working through. So, and by working through those things, they're obviously at the front edge of what is going to be a industry-wide transition. And really looking forward to the progress they're making.
Sustainable construction. Simple terms, what does it mean? Because there was a survey done, and we found in this survey that 69% of stakeholders and 60% of the public see sustainable construction as a priority. But in that, only 28% of professionals feel that they really understand it.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So within that there, how would you explain sustainable construction so that more than 28% would understand exactly what it means?
Yeah. I think this is sort of more of we're all probably drawn towards what we're more familiar with in our everyday lives. It's probably more just our human condition that we know what to do in terms of how to save energy in our homes. We know how to make sustainable choices, maybe with our food. We know the basics around reducing the impact of travel choices. But when it comes to choices around the built environment and construction, it is just that little bit further removed from our everyday experience. And it's very hard I'd say this is more general. This is for lay people to really appreciate where to start, what to ask, what to do. And I think obviously there's a lot of people who work in the construction sector who really want to do the right thing and not always have full remit to follow that through. So I think there's probably an exciting period ahead where if we can introduce the right processes and systems are always very effective in terms of like just scaling and getting things done. So that might be one mechanism, but also just encouraging everyone to care, I think, a bit more about it. So it's okay to care about concrete. It's okay care to question. I think there's a lot of people who, once you get under the skin of all the different factors that come into, optimizing all the different facets of concrete, it can get very fascinating. So, yeah.
What is there that people in the industry can do to try and help those outside of the industry bubble to have a better understanding or appreciation?
I think that's, very interesting and something we're very active on at the moment. One reason being that for the construction sector to achieve their potential in this space, it needs the right, regulatory framework around it. And that means getting the appropriate information at the appropriate level and fully evidenced to the policymakers who do want to see this shift happen. And they want to hear from the industry in how best they can support it. There's a consultation going on over the summer from Desnes in the UK, and it's actually, they're trying to cover a lot, but just on one little topic, they want to introduce product classifications. So, and this is something, and in quite a lot of cases, you get good learnings from other sectors. This is like your energy rating on a fridge, where you've got different classifications for energy usage, similarly for embodied carbon. And it's to help in the communication. And that can be within the construction sector, but also outside the construction sector. And I think some of those kind of tools could be really helpful to, bringing more people into the conversation.
I think that is really, really important. Is how do you take something which is viewed by most of the world or most of the country as complex, and make it digestible? How do you take all of these different data points, of which embodied carbon is one of them, and then turn that into something that means something to someone as they're passing by and they've got 2 seconds to take a glance and make a decision? Do I want this one or do I want that one?
Yeah.
And I think that's what that graph can really do.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's to support that kind of decision making, because yes, if you want to make decisions, you need to be able to process a lot of information quite quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And are you involved in that?
We're developing a response to that consultation. We're happy to see it come out, because I think quite a good role for the sort of regulatory space is to provide these guardrails, sort of the basic foundations, then which the industry can just like leapfrog that bit and then move on to the implementation and action part, which is probably more pressing.
Another stat for you: Google searches have increased by 62% around asking this question: what is embodied carbon? Now, how would you answer that question? What is embodied carbon?
Yeah. Since when? That's quite good. Does that mean there's more people caring about it?
People are asking the question.
Or
more people don't understand it.
Yeah, we're using impenetrable lingo.
Yeah. What is embodied carbon?
Yeah, it's all the carbon that happened before it got to you. So when you get your concrete delivered on site, it's all the emissions that happened upstream, is the lingo term, before it arrived, effectively. So that's primarily, as we touched on at the start, from the cement production, but includes transport. It includes the mining and processing of the aggregates and other components as well.
And so how can people affect embodied carbon? How can they reduce their embodied carbon?
So I suppose the embodied carbon that they are responsible for, hierarchies. So we're focused on reducing that embodied carbon of the material, but we really believe that you should only be looking at that once you've ruled out not using concrete at all in the first place. And then once you've realised, yes, concrete is the right material for this application, to first look at making sure you're using the right concrete. By that I mean making sure it's not too strong, or you haven't over-designed it and added lots of fancy things that aren't really justified or needed for the use of the concrete. And you should try to be smart with the design of the material. And once you've done all of that and you still have to use concrete, then you look to reduce the embodied carbon by finding the supply chain with the lowest associated emissions. So Some kilns might be more efficient than the others. Sometimes you don't have to transport the aggregate as far, the rocks, and that makes a big difference to the transport emission.
And how would I be able to find that out? The supply chains of...
Yeah, it's an evolving area. So data availability in this space is improving, but it is hard. It's hard.
But where would I even start, though? If I wanted to find out now, is there a website that I can go to? Is there someone that I can phone? Is there a hotline? Where do I even start?
There are databases. No.
Where do I get the database from, though? Can I just put that in Google? Tell me the supply chain of this?
For the concrete you order,
yeah,
your supplier will know where they got all the constituents from. That's so the concrete sector in the UK is particularly vertically integrated, so they know a lot about where all the materials come from. In terms of the environmental data, they issue certificates called Environmental Product Declarations, or EPDs, which are calculated or derived from life cycle analysis, life cycle assessment, LCA, second one, life cycle assessment.
That's the one, yeah. That's the one.
And they are a big piece of work. They involve not only modelling the carbon impacts, but all the other environmental impacts of the entire process. And that includes the embodied carbon, the upstream portion, but also covers the in-use and end-of-life phase. It's a big, and cost of developing these is a barrier to their availability. And there is work undergoing to streamline the development of these data sets. For a little sense, there is in the UK the MPA Fact Sheet 18, Mineral Product Association. They maintain some average values for the UK industry, and they put it on a fact sheet which gets updated every now and again. There was an update this year, so for a little pulse check of what the current emissions are, that's a good place to start.
And what do you see the future of this?
In terms of the data?
Yeah.
I would, long term, there is a concept around building product passports. And to support that would be a lovely, automated, digitalized system that meets the information needs of everybody from supplier through the whole value chain up to potentially the financiers and investors. That is the dream.
See, I think that is a really quick and easy win. And I know that some people will not agree with me, but I really do think that that's a quick and easy win.
I would say we're trying to do a little bit of that at the moment, and it's not easy. But it is not easy. But I am optimistic because from the little bit we've been able to do so far, and we're still working on with members, we are realizing value from that data. So I find it very upsetting when data is just seen as a burden, a compliance process, and it's tick boxes and nothing else. Just maybe you want to find the total, but you don't care about how you got to that total. But our experience is that if you ask the right questions, you can get some really actionable insights. ConcreteZero members commit to a target. Great. One thing we have to obviously do is hold them accountable to the target, which involves reporting. So the data element, we've piloted a form for that, and we've got some promising results, and we're evolving it. We're trying to improve it. We're trying to push towards the more supply chain specific EPDs where available. But we're also looking at the turning all that data into insights that can drive change. So we have members who are contractors and clients, and they have visibility of the concrete used. So that's great. Not just what concrete was used on what project, but what concrete was used in what element. So what type of element. So be it a column, a wall, a slab, foundations, piles, etc. And we can find out a lot by maybe looking across all the projects, all the data from our members, and we can see what is best practice, and not only feed that back to the members, but also make sure that the specifiers, so the engineers and the designers, get early sight of that market data so that they can better specify for lower carbon solutions going forward. Hopefully, a little virtuous, positive feedback loop. So we've got early stage signs that this can not only meet our needs at ConcreteZero of holding members accountable, but can help them make better decisions around concrete. So we'll see. This is quite new for the sector, and we're optimistic, but we need to see the data come in. So we've had a pilot, that was great. We need to really test this.
One of the reasons why, at least in my imagination, it's simple is because blockchain technology exists now, but it hadn't existed. It existed, maybe you could say always, but it's usable now versus historically. So put things on the blockchain, you then have that accountability element, because you can't make a transaction without that transaction being recorded, but recorded accurately, especially with the sustainability consultancy that has, one of the things that we've noticed that when people are doing anything relating to embodied carbon, especially LCAs, because that area is not regulated, you can submit a report, and if you've got a logo on there, and that logo can be anything, it's taken as right and correct, but actually it's not right and correct if you do it properly. And so the reason that I'm saying it's easy in terms of using the use of blockchain technology, you don't need an overarching body to control, and you don't need an auditing process that is manual, and an update that's done that then goes into a booklet that then goes out to everyone else, and they need to be trained, and so on and so on. This is just something that once you do this, then there's going to be a cascade chain reaction that will then say, yes, we agree with what you've done, or no, we don't agree with what you've done, do it again.
Yeah. I mean, I feel it could be doable, but as there are challenges with the EPD comparability, because there's differences in the LCA modeling decisions, so that there's a challenge in that respect. I think digitalization of the data is also still to be addressed completely. Paper delivery notes with concrete supplies are still common practice. But I know that there's, I think, some academic groups who are currently looking at little bits of this, including maybe monitoring the concrete deliveries, being able to start to feed that data into the construction sites. So I hope there'll be improvements soon, and really supportive of any kind of automation kind of improvement. So I think if we, through what we still share with our members as an Excel tool, if we can just get the structure right, the questions that support their decision making, it would be wonderful if technology savvy software company who would like to commercialize it.
And please don't think.
Let's get it right first.
So don't think that anything I'm saying is kind of criticism. The fact that LCAs aren't done right. You go back to when I first set the company up, 2007. These things didn't exist back then. Like no one was bothered. The thought of an LCA, they'd be like, well, I don't know that acronym. I don't know what you're on about. Or the word embodied carbon. That wasn't. I don't even know that existed, that word there. So huge progress since then. But the way that I see the combination of data and then being able to interpret that data through a filter and that to come out to mean something to someone, again, going back to the graph, that sliding scale from A to G or from A to whatever that you want to put it on, it just needs to be, okay, I know what that is. A is at the top, it's green, it's good, it's got a plus on it. And that's better than G, which is a bit, I don't know, redder or a bit brown or whatever it is. That's kind of like, so there's those two indicators there, the letters and the colors that say one is higher than the other. But using blockchain technology, at least in my thinking, solves a load of problems.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
If anyone wants to run with that idea, they can kind of coin it as their own.
Yes. That would be a great outcome.
Good. What involvement are you having with government and lobbying and trying to make a shift and a change?
We don't lobby as an organisation, but we do believe in bringing all the people needed to affect, the pretty massive system-wide change that we need to realise together, and that includes policymakers, and quite often sort of knowledge sharing between industry players and those involved in researching and evidencing and developing policy regulations is, a really important part of that. A little practical example is that a couple of years ago, there was a group formed to extend the technical standards used for concrete. So there's a class of newer concretes using alternative binder systems, they're called. So these are ones without as much the Portland cement in, and they fall outside the existing technical codes. And in most cases, specifiers, the people who decide what concrete is used, say you can, use any concrete that's within code. So there was a new class of concrete that wasn't in code. And some of our members joined that working group and developed with the British Standards Institute, BSI, the Flex 350 standard. And that has been used now. So, it's being used and updated. And there's kind of learnings from that, I think. But, getting involved in, those kind of documents, the development of the standards and the regulations, and making sure that the concrete users are at the table, I think is very important. So the suppliers, there's a whole different order of magnitude in terms of the sort of the scale and the concentration on the supply and the demand side with concrete. So there are a very small number of very large international concrete suppliers and cement suppliers, whereas even the largest contractors and engineering firms in the world are quite small compared to them. So you really need to bring those demand side players together and make sure, because, we aren't a lobbyist, but we do want to make sure that they, not us, ideally it's the corporates themselves that join these conversations with their expertise and make sure it reflects what they need, not just what the supply side need. We're coming up to our 3rd year anniversary, and Canary Wharf Group was one of the founding members 3 years ago, and we had the launch event in their nice swanky offices. So they've been involved in a number of high-rise developments where they're really pushing the boundary in terms of using the data on live projects, which I think, we were talking about earlier. But it is not just, specifying mixes at the start of a project, but responding to different conditions during the project to adapt those mixes. And as you adapt them, to monitor as the project goes how you're doing against your carbon target. So they also use some quite fancy high-tech kind of monitoring kind of gizmos. I don't know much about that. And it's really good to see. And I think this is the case with quite a lot of the members. So if we have one member who works in one project team and then they go and work in another project team, they take that learning. So in this case, Canary Wharf is the client. So on subsequent projects, they know that this can be done, and this is what they then require, and they push it. So there's the One North Quay project that is currently underway, where they're further evolving some of that best practice from the earlier project. So that's what a client can possibly do is, demand more, demand better. And if you ask for the data, make sure it's used.
And I think I know where that project is, and there's a lot of concrete there.
Yeah. I wouldn't know how much concrete. Coming here today, I was like, maybe I need a stat about how much concrete. Would you like to guess how much concrete's in the Shard, according to Google?
In the Shard, according to Google, I have no idea.
20,000, 50,000, or 100,000 meter cubed.
Sorry, just give me that number again.
20, 50, or 100,000 meter cubed.
I go for the top one. 100,000 meters.
50, supposedly 54,000 meter cubed, which is about 7,000 concrete delivery trucks.
Okay.
I think that's quite a lot, but it's really hard to get your head around, right? So maybe it's not a lot. Seems a lot. That's a lot of trucks. Once you work in this space, when you're cycling around London, you're like, oh, another cement mix. Oh, another. There's a lot of construction.
There's a huge amount. And I'm just wondering now, it's a really daft question. So excuse the really daft question. What did the Egyptians do? These pyramids that have been up long time.
I don't know.
How did they create the base? I appreciate they've got sand, they've got that in abundance, but you need other elements to bind it and to bond it together. So
I don't know much about the Egyptians, but I quite often see reference to the Roman mortars.
Okay, great.
So Pantheon, still standing, the mortars used. And, I think material scientists are still looking at, the chemistries. And
so do they not know what they're in?
Oh, no, they do.
They do, okay, fine.
You can stick it in different microscopes, right?
Yeah, so what was used then?
I don't know, but yeah, it's...
Because these buildings back then were built to last.
Yeah.
When they built it, it was predominantly to satisfy someone's ego.
Yeah.
And that ego was to last as long as possible, right?
I'm not sure.
But when we build now, it doesn't feel that same way. When I look at buildings that were built in the 70s, it screams to me, this was built in the 70s, this is dated. But when I look at something that it was built in the 70s, is dated, maybe we need to retrofit this or pull it down. Something needs to change. It doesn't quite sit. When I look at something which is significantly older, I look at it and go, wow, that looks beautiful.
I don't know why that is, because, I think it's natural, right? Or it's something wrong with us generally. But then once it gets to a certain age, then it just seems, it's just old. And then it's okay. So there's obviously this kind of interim period where we think we need to improve it. But once it gets too old, then we say, no, we should never, ever touch it again.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, there is obviously the need to maybe, fast consumption patterns when applied to construction and built environments are not healthy or not sustainable at all.
And so that then brings my thought process on to my really daft question to the way that we think. So the thinking here is linear, right? We start here cradle to grave as opposed to cradle to cradle, and people will use the phrase cradle to gate. So how can we get to a point where no matter how much cement is used, no matter how much embodied carbon is there, actually, when we think about it over the life cycle of the building, which is for hundreds of years,
if you design,
it really is not too much of an issue, because we know that kind of touching 1,000 years, this thing is still going to be really serving the people it was designed to serve, as opposed to we're giving the building a life cycle of 60 years, which I think is it's not even the lifetime of a human, maybe back in the 1920s, 1930s, maybe a little bit, maybe in the 1800s, definitely in the 1800s, that was a grand old age. But now, if someone, you read in the paper, on the news or whatever, they pass away at 60, they're pretty young. 60 is not that long.
No, you see buildings getting pulled down before that, which is, it's a shame. And ideally we should be looking for that kind of longer term thinking, not because, the waste associated with demolishing buildings is another, huge challenge that I suppose if I sit in the bucket of embodied carbon, I'm going to just leave that for somebody else to deal with, but it still needs dealing with.
Because when I think about all of this together, I think that actually waste is a better word than embodied carbon or net zero or anything else like that, because effectively what we're saying is it's taken a lot of energy to create this thing, and this thing that's been created, so it can be cement, it could be concrete, it could be whatever it is, a building, so I'll use the word this thing. All that effort and all that energy has gone into creating this thing.
Yeah.
Then it's going to be wasted. It's not going to last for that long. And if I break that down to something that I know anyone can understand, is if I go to the back door of a restaurant and I see loads and loads of food being thrown in the bin or being recycled or whatever, my heart's going to sink. I'm not going to think, yes, look at all of that that's going to be recycled. I'm not going to think that way. I'm going to be like, why did they use? Why are they wasting? So to me, it seems like a waste issue.
Yeah.
Although it's framed as net zero, net carbon.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Sorry, zero carbon, net zero.
Yeah. So the way we might respond to food waste, I don't think naturally translates for most people into construction waste, because it's an inert material. It looks like rocks. However, the energy loss it represents is phenomenal. Making that connection clearer could be quite powerful. But then, do they have the ability to change or change it in their everyday lives? It's difficult. So in the construction sector, you do have more of a remit to do that in lots of ways. So I think it's potentially quite an exciting space to be in.
I think so, and I think that I think any waste really. I'm just thinking of a situation where I see something being wasted, and I feel really excited and really happy by that, and I can't think of one.
No.
Whether that's food or materials or my time or...
No. So it's more just being,
in a waste of a resource. Just, I don't know of anyone that's like, yes, look at all this waste.
But out of sight, out of mind. The waste sector is very efficient at getting You see the barges going down the Thames.
Okay.
Don't ask what they are. Just taking the waste out.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's really interesting.
I think that the thing though in that is making it understandable, tangible, and accessible to people.
Yeah.
Because at the moment there's lots of data points.
Yeah.
LCA, embodied carbon, all of these different things, various certificates, various different programs. How can this be bundled together to create something which just at a glance I can say, okay, yeah.
Well, there are potential shortcuts. The data can be it's a great thing, but it can also get in the way. For example, the most carbon intensive cement product is called CEM1. So if you ask for concrete without CEM1, so you say I want something other than CEM1, then that will mean you get a lower carbon concrete. So these are CEM2, CEM3, CEM4, and the higher numbers generally indicate more of the lower carbon substitute materials have been added. So, there is sort of shortcuts, or even just asking the question, what cement is in this product? Why? That can also show who you're asking that this is something that you're thinking about, and they need to get a good answer for it.
So as an example, then we could, if I was a developer, I could say we no longer build with CEM1.
Yeah.
That would be a great way to.
So that is the approach some are taking. And I think it's kind of there's a carrot and stick. So sometimes you need to just say no to cut off maybe that tail of lower performing products. But I think what's probably more exciting is how can you incentivize and be supportive of the really groundbreaking. So let's forget the standard, put in some slag, put in some fly ash. Let's think about the really new to market products that we want to see grow. And that isn't necessarily going to happen organically. That needs a strong demand signal, and it needs support from the demand side, and also maybe from the finance industry to identify and develop these kind of innovative materials. There's an interesting project that is called the Advanced Market Commitment. It is Googleable. They have a website. They're not quite live yet, but they're in sort of pre-launch, and it's all about the demand side, specifically committing to procuring some of these innovative low carbon materials. So it's more than just saying we commit to getting below a target. It's actually committing to using, if they're brought to market, these products, which then gives the investors confidence to invest in the scaling to meet the demand. So I think it's a really exciting project that's coming online, and could be that carrot, that way of growing and pushing forward on those really, really low carbon materials.
I'm wondering what lessons can be learned from other industries.
Well, that particular project is using a template developed for the COVID vaccines. So when the COVID vaccines needed to be developed, the government, in this case, agreed to buy them before they were even available.
Okay.
So it's that kind of mechanism, which then allowed the scaling and deployment of an insane number of vaccines in a short period of time. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, interesting. The one that was in my mind, though, that is a good one. The one that was in my mind is there's been a huge rise of ChatGPT. There was a massive uptake of users in Facebook. Felt like it happened overnight. But in both instances, it didn't. It started with a small group. It was very targeted. Then it went to a larger group, and that was very targeted before it went to a larger group.
Yeah.
And then the fourth stage was, okay, this is now open to everybody. But that last stage, there's a number of people that knew about it and wanted to get involved, but they felt that they weren't able to gain access because it was just for a group of people. So that's obviously in the tech space, not in the construction space.
I don't think we want to be putting up any artificial barriers to getting involved in these type of mechanisms or ConcreteZero. So we are open if you're involved on the demand side. It's not an exclusive club at all. So it's all about knowledge sharing, pushing best practice, changing the narrative of what can be done now, normalizing it, all of that. So yeah, I think that it will, there will be leaders. I'm very happy to get to work with a lot of them. So that's excellent. But yeah, I don't think we want to be putting up barriers to anyone who wants to do anything. So there's no silver bullet with cement and concrete. It's going to take everything and everybody. So the supply side can't fix it by themselves. The demand side will need to use lots and lots of little levers, over and over again, micro improvements. Sometimes you'll get step changes, but it will be this continual optimization process that gets us where we need to be.
It's been great having you on the podcast today. I've enjoyed your passion and enjoyed the opportunity to talk to you about concrete and about embodied carbon. I am just wondering here, just as a last parting question, what message you have for the listeners and for the audience that would further help your cause and what you're trying to achieve?
I'd say just find out, educate yourself a little bit more about concrete, and don't get put off by the technical content. If you like that kind of thing, there's plenty of it, but I'd say not to be put off by it. And yeah, just look around while you go out and about. And once you start looking for it, you can't get away from stuff unless you go very far deep into the mountains. But we are a young initiative, 3 years in. We feel that we're doing good in the market. We're responding to a market need. We're complementing the strengths and technical expertise of our membership, layering on something a little different. We're open to keep exploring this, getting feedback. There's so much to do. Prioritizing is our main concern. There's different markets, there's different levers, there's different ways we can be supporting our members. So yeah, talk to us, I'd say, is the most useful thing. There's an example where one of our members married efficiency, so material efficiency, whether and how you use concrete, with the material intensity bit, what concrete you use, and getting that as low as possible. It was an example. It was an example in the Bristol University development that happened last year.
Okay.
And it involved actually an engineering member, so Borough Happold, as well as a contractor, Sir Robert McAlpine. And it is quite often the case. So they were challenged to reduce the cost of the build. And it was quite a challenging site. And then both by effectively cutting the amount of concrete, so reducing the amount of concrete used in the structure, as well as early engagement with the supplier. So if they had just on the first day of the build asked the supplier, what have you got for us? Their options would have been much more limited. But by going to the supplier a few months in advance to say, look, we're going to be needing all this concrete in 3 months. Can you give us a silo of this lower carbon material? That opened up an opportunity. So for that particular project, they think they cut the emissions by a quarter, which is, it's a lot. So those things, I think, really, being able to put a number on it makes it seem a bit more, hopefully, worthwhile for others to maybe look at. And it's actually one of the slightly positive things we can say about concrete, tackling emissions in concrete at the moment, is that it doesn't always come with a price premium.
And
that is different to steel and other materials. So it's not always the case. And when you are pushing the boundary and trying to, scale new technologies, there will be sort of implications there. But for some of the off-the-shelf lower carbon materials, the price premium is, okay.
And this, what you're talking about here, is really easy done. It's really easily achieved.
I couldn't do it, but maybe, a powerhouse of an engineering consultancy and a leading contractor put their brains together.
But I don't know. I think it's easy because, all you need to do is come together early and just communicate that out early. That concept is simple. That concept isn't going to cost you any more money. It's not going to cost you any more time. I think, in fact, it's going to save you time because you're coming in at an earlier stage to say, giving you a heads up, this is what's going to be coming in the future.
Yeah.
Can you start the process rolling now for me?
Yeah.
And I'm guessing here that they didn't commit strongly, as in pay a significant amount of money beforehand. So it did that upset their cash flow in any way, shape or form?
No, I don't think that would have been needed. No, I don't know the exact commercials of the arrangement, but I think there was a sort of a commitment to maybe introduce 35% of these lower carbon materials, and they actually beat that target in the end. And and another practical way people sort of start to look into this is, yes, this early engagement with suppliers, but also to get kind of pre-approval on a suite of mixes. So instead of just having maybe 3 or 4 mixes approved by the engineer at the start of the project, if you have more, then you can use them differently, and there's a lot more optimization than you could do across the lifetime of the project.
So how would that work then to get multiple mixes approved at the early stage?
Yeah, so there's a sort of a process when it comes to making decisions around what concrete use. It's called a specification process. We've put out a bit of a guidance on that. So earlier this year, there's quite a lengthy document on our website, but it's got some good pictures in it. One, which I think is quite a useful resource to explore, is a matrix. If you like matrices, it's got the different construction stages across the top, and it's got the different roles in a construction project down this side. And basically, it shows what you can be doing depending on your role and where you're at in the build, how you can be questioning, influencing, checking, driving the specification of lower carbon concrete. Because traditionally, it's been quite linear. The engineer specifies, the contractor, designs the mix, the supplier provides it, or provides, the mix, and the engineer checks it, and that's it. But, if you really want to unlock the expertise of all of those involved, because ultimately the choices on what concrete use isn't all about how strong you need it to be at the end. There are a lot of other factors around the construction process that come into play. And, you're never going to know that unless you ask the people doing the construction, for example. Maybe you don't need the early strength gain. Maybe they can leave that to cure and do something else in the meantime. There's lots of things. And if you don't ask, you won't know, effectively.
The other thing is, you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say that. Also, you don't get. Well, if you don't ask, you don't know what's possible.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think just asking that and starting that conversation early. That's just one of the things I'm just a really big advocate for. There's so many good things that happen when you plan early and ask early and just get things done early. Even waking up early, so many good things happen.
Yeah, you're not going to get me on that.
But just early engagement it just leads to so many good advantages. But just doing things late, or when you just need it to be done, or just before it needs to be done, it's just you've just lost all your wiggle room.
Yeah. Anyway, so hopefully. Maybe we can put it in the comments or something, but that's quite a useful document for somebody.
Yeah, giving us that. Yeah, you can give us access to that, can't you?
Yeah, it's all on our website. We've got a few of these things.
Yeah, that'd be good. Good. Definitely getting up early is good though.
Yeah.
No, it's been great having you on the podcast.
No problem, Darren. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Thanks for watching to the end. I think that you'll like this, but before you do that, just make sure that you've commented and liked below, and also that you've subscribed.